Well, I want to say welcome to New Tracks Meetup tonight. Thanks so much for coming. And I hope you'll come back very often and tell your friends about us, because the more the merrier. I want to talk a little bit about the train show tonight. It's November the 21st, 1 o'clock Eastern time in the afternoon. And I think it's really going to be something very, very special. Bernard Heller, who owns a company in Canada called Mini Prints, is here this evening. Bernard is going to be one of the vendors in the show, and he'd like to tell you a little bit about his company. Bernard, I'll turn it over to you, sir.
Well, thanks so much, Jim. It's a wonderful event, and we're super excited to participate. And thank you for the opportunity to talk a little bit this evening about mini prints and my unique story. I'm just going to set a little timer here because I don't want to go over my allotted time. I'm new to the model railroad manufacturing. I've started my little mini business recently. Like many people, due to COVID, I found myself with a little less employment than I would like and a little more time than I usually have. So I wanted to share with you today a little story about how I went from a model railroader to a newly minted model railroad manufacturer. So if you bear with me for 1 second, I'm going to share my screen, and I've got a little presentation I'd like to pull up. Will you guys let me know if you can see my PDF in a minute? So hang on. Okay, let's share and let's go full screen.
All right, and you are live, Bernard.
Fantastic. And let me just put this in full screen. Okay, do you see a full screen right now?
We do.
All right, well, my company is called miniprints.ca, and the idea behind it is to really make your model railroad come alive. And I'll tell you a little bit about the story, how I started with this idea. This is me. This is me in Quebec City about 5 or 6 years ago. I model a Genesee and Wyoming short line.
Hey, not to cut you off real quick, but I still see the title slide. It didn't scroll down.
Oh. Yes, same here.
Okay, did it scroll down now? You don't see the second slide?
No, it's just showing the viewer.
All right, let's just try.
Oh, there we go.
There we go.
All right, I won't take it in full screen mode, so that I'll do it this way.
Alrighty.
All right, so let's just try and get rid of this. Always a few technical issues. All right, so how's that? So there I am in Quebec City about 5, 6 years ago. I model the Quebec Gatineau, which is a Genesee and Wyoming short line. So if you're wondering, that's what I'll look like in front of a SW 1500. And this is my layout. It's HO scale. And I model in HO from Montreal to Quebec City. It's a layout that's built for operations eventually. I'm not there yet. It occupies most of my basement, and the main room is 30 feet by 10 feet. And my journey to becoming a model railroad manufacturer starts up in this corner of my layout. So I was building a little scene with a beaver lodge, and I don't know whether you can see it, but right here, a little beaver lodge. And this was about 4 or 5 years ago. I was looking high and low for model railroad, HO scale model railroad beavers, and they did not exist. And it made no sense because it's the iconic animal of Canada. It's built this country. It's even on the logo of the Canadian Pacific Railway, and I could not find an HO scale beaver anywhere. So I thought, okay, whoops, I'll go back. I thought, okay, no big deal, I'll make one. So I designed it in a 3D program, and I sent it off to an online service. And 3 weeks later, I got my little HO scale beaver. But everything changed earlier this year. This is the Elegoo Mars resin printer. And it's going to change the way I think people approach our hobby. It certainly changed the way I approach model railroading. And it's given me flexibility to do incredible things. Rapid prototyping, one-offs, really gives me a lot of flexibility. So here are the 3 beavers that I was able to create. It gives me different poses, swimming, standing, chewing a tree. And so, of course, I made these and friends started saying, hey, those are kind of neat. I'd like some for my layout. And Mini Prints was born. So it all comes from this one personal need to a website that now has over 70 animals. And I'm branching out into people and objects, all 3D printed on this resin technology. On the miniprints.ca website, I've got about, well, actually, I think I'm up to 72 animals in N scale, HO scale, O scale, and S scale, divided into the animals of the sky, the land, and the water. Most of these came about as of requests. So somebody said, hey, you know, I've got a West Coast scene, I need some orcas. I'm like, no problem. It became a product. Somebody was modeling the scene from Jaws. It became a product. There's a great white shark. Had a lot of Florida modelers saying, how come you don't have manatees? I added manatees. So this is really all driven by what people want to see. I was slowly running out of animals that had, you know, some sort of marketability. I didn't think too many people would need giraffes on their layout. So I was looking for new things and I thought, you know what, people are kind of fun. So recently, and this is sort of my newest thing, I've just started getting into people. So today I posted some bagpipers, which was a request. I metal detect. So I was out this last weekend up at my parents' cottage metal detecting. So I thought, yeah, I didn't see an HO scale metal detector anywhere. So I made one of those. I had a request for a guy playing a banjo on a porch in a rocking chair. So I made one of those. So really most of this stuff is either stuff that I personally wanted to see or stuff that I couldn't find or things that people have written to me and said, you know, hey, can you make me a whatever? And the company's really grown from there. We've done about 300 orders since March to Australia, Norway, Sweden, Italy, France, United Kingdom, and Australia, and of course, the United States and Canada. So it's just sort of one of these things that, you know, I didn't set off to become a model railroad manufacturer, but, you know, like most serendipitous things, it just kind of happened. Had a little fun with some objects. Someone wanted some Muskoka chairs. You can't have skeletons without coffins. You know, it's the right time of the year for some Halloween themed things. So I'm just sort of adding sporadically, you know, as we go. One thing I'm having a little bit of fun with are the Mini Prints of the Month Club. So I've launched sort of a monthly subscription, which I won't talk about now, but I'll certainly get into a little bit more when we talk about, when we present on the 21st. And a bit of a teaser, there will be a discount offered to people who log in online on the 21st, but I'm not going to tell you what it is until you log in, and then I'll give you the super secret discount code. And all Mini Prints on that day will have a percentage off. So that's probably pretty much my time. You know, I'll just sort of in the last 1 second go through some of the creations that we've created. Personally, the smaller the better. The company is called Mini Prints. So, you know, I like when people challenge me. This is an HO scale groundhog. These are some HO scale crabs and some skulls. One of my favorites, HO scale pileated, otherwise known as Woody the Woodpecker. And I think probably the smallest thing, one of the smallest things I ever created, somebody wanted the great white shark Jaws from the movie Jaws in N scale. So that's about it. If anyone wants to check out the website, it's miniprints.ca. And if anyone has any really crazy requests, don't ask for anything in Z scale. I won't go there. But if anyone has any crazy requests, it's Bernard@miniprints.ca, and I'm up for the challenge. No promises, but happy to give it a try. And lots more fun on the 21st. So I hope you'll join in and be part of that exciting event. I know I'm really excited to be part of it. Thanks, Jim.
Bernard, I really do appreciate it. And just so everybody knows, Bernard now is a member of our team putting on the show on the 21st. He brings a tremendous amount of marketing information for us, And Bernard, I really do appreciate the help and all of your advice that you gave us tonight.
Well, I didn't have a choice. You basically said, you know, you voluntold me into the position, and I'm thrilled to do it.
Voluntold, I like that.
Whatever it takes.
You know what? I'm happy to be part of it. It's going to be a hoot. I'm really looking forward to it.
Hey,
Well,
Dylan,
thanks.
I hate the term voluntold because that's pretty much my military career.
Yeah, mine too.
All right, I'll stop
Very
sharing my screen. And thanks a lot, guys. Thanks for giving me a few minutes to share my story.
That's great. Next thing I'd like to mention to you is we have a website called newtracksmodeling.com. And we would appreciate it if you would go there and register on that site. You'll start getting emails from us notifying us of the various events, the shows that we're putting on, and particularly the train show. So the site is newtracksmodeling.com. And TC, thank you so very much for all the great work you're doing putting together the site for us. I think it looks great. And I hope everybody goes and registers to it.
If I may, for a little while,
Yes, sir.
I have it ready to show. So
Yes,
I
sir.
logged out so people can see it like it looks. This is the home page. And this is the register button we keep talking about. If you enter your email right up here, you can click this red button afterwards, and it'll quit saying register. It'll say you are registered. And then the website here will send you an email every time I post something like about tonight's show right here. You can go here and learn about Jim. You can go here, and there's a calendar. You can click on it like tonight, click on that, and it gives you the logins. You can go to the meetups page, and there's, once again, a way to get to the individual things. And the train show page, where we talk about our train show, which we'll be getting a lot of updates over the weekend. And here is the My Build page, which it takes forever to load, but there's a gallery of the last couple of shows and information about it. Chris does a good job posting that out. And so that is the website, newtracksmodeling.com. Back to you, Jim.
TC, thanks so much. You're doing a great job, and particularly Chris's work with the My Bill section. I think that's coming along very, very nicely. Our next one is December the 12th, and I hope that you'll come, bring a model to share with us, and let us see what you're doing. Now I'd like to talk and turn it over to our feature model tonight, Chris Oliver. I am just super impressed with Chris and his model railroad, and I think you will be too. And the work that he is doing on it and the automation that he has with it, the computerization part of it, I think it's just, I think it's the way the hobby may be going. And I think it's fantastic of you, Chris, to take the time to be with us this evening. So welcome, and I'll turn it over to you.
Chris, hold on a sec. You muted.
Thank you, Jim.
Yeah.
And I'm going to start with a PowerPoint presentation, and then I'll go from there into, we can do some discussion. And then I have sort of a virtual tour I'll walk through with some video I did during the day yesterday. So it gives a more current look at how things are on the layout. So I chose the Donner Pass area really because back in, I think it was back around 1997, I was out in Salt Lake City actually on a business trip, and I stopped in a hobby shop and I saw this book. There's the cover of the book on the really a well-documented history of the building through Donner Pass, first by the Central Pacific, then the Southern Pacific, and now, of course, it's been merged up into be part of the Union Pacific. So that became sort of my dream to do a layout of that. And over the last, almost 25 years now, I've finally been able to kind of starting to live the dream. And that all began, as you'll see, back around 2012. So I model from about, actually visibly model from about Colfax all the way across the Donner Pass and down into Truckee. And then I have staging on either side of that, as you'll see. So when I started the process, I really wanted to build kind of my dream layout, and I did dream a lot. So these were some of the key goals, really to recreate what it was like for mainline railroading through the mountains, which today, you know, we think of as Class 1 railroading. And ultimately, I thought I was going to model kind of the current era, but I've chosen to focus now down 1951 plus or minus, say, 5 years. So one of the key goals I had was to kind of put the scale in motion. And I'll talk more about that as we go. So some of the real important aspects of that, the trains move at scale speeds with scaled inertia, depending on whether they're going upgrade, downgrade, or starting, how much power is on the train. And the size of the trains are pretty representative in terms of, I use about a 40 car freights, 40-foot car equivalents. So I do about a 2-to-1 scale factor for freights, and I try to create the passenger trains full length or pretty close to that. So 15 cars or so is typical. Another aspect is this concept of immersion. As you'll see in the videos, you're really moving around the layout and you feel like you're kind of can reach out and see the action as it climbs up the mountainside. And I did that through the design process, and hopefully that'll come out in some of the video you'll see. And also wanted to create a lot of, I've been able to assemble a lot of books and now thanks to YouTube, even a lot of historical film in that. So I use that as a guide, and I've tried to recreate some of those key settings and scenes in the layout. And for me, I really am into the concept of operating the layout the way it would be operated, if you will, in real life. So the concepts of prototype in signaling and recreating that methodology and action in the signals, as well as ultimately I'm moving towards the ability to run, like in a user setting or an operating group setting, a train order and timetable type of operation. And I'll kind of get into all this as we go through. So one of the key goals I had was, up until the last few years, I really didn't know anybody in model railroading directly, but I think it was back in 2016, I joined the Seacoast Modelers Group, which is an NMRA chapter and part of the Northeast Division. And since then, obviously, I've come in contact with a great many people, and now I'm finding I want to be able to not only run my layout by myself, but also have other people participate and enjoy it with me. But this is a key aspect for me because I really also built this layout so that when people come to view it, I can spend time interacting with those people. Like today, I had 2 gentlemen come and see the layout who hadn't been able to see it in the past during open house days. And I spent about 2 hours with them going through and talking about the layout, much like I'll do tonight with everybody. And the layout was running the whole time, and it ran pretty good. So you'll see in the videos I did. So So far, I think I'm doing pretty good on that goal. And the final thing was this, I wanted a lifetime project. I have no more plans to move, and my wife seems to be in quite good agreement with that. And so I picked a project here that really will last a lifetime. So I'll touch more on this through the presentation, but basically, when I started the layout, I didn't think I could get the equipment, and I didn't think I'd have the structures anytime soon to represent the early 50s. So I actually thought I'd start with a plan of modeling it as it looked in the early 2000s. And fortunately, though, or unfortunately, after I bought a lot of modern equipment and had trains running, I found the one of the key things was Intermountain introduced a very good model of the cab forward. And that gave me the idea that I could really accelerate my transition to more of an early 50s theme. And that's actually what's been occurring since about 2014. And the reason for that is these are some scenes from around the 1950 timeframe. Railroading, quite simply, had a lot more drama involved in it, a lot more people involved in it, and a lot more interaction and a lot more structures that provide modeling opportunities than today. Most of the structures along this line no longer exist, with the exception of the station at Colfax and the station at Truckee, which are now been remodeled and used as local, like, Chamber of Commerce area, or also partially as an Amtrak station. So there's plenty of operational opportunities in the early 50s that, frankly, the trains today take about 4 hours to go up and over Donner Pass, and they typically have 5 to 7 locomotives and range from, say, 7 to 10,000 feet in length, and they never stop with distributed power. So there's not a lot of excitement from a modeler's point of view. So in the fall of 2011, we decided we were moving back to New Hampshire. We were living down near a place called Lake Norman, just north of Charlotte, North Carolina. And so we started looking for properties, and ultimately we found a property that had one very important thing as far as I'm concerned. It had a really nice barn type outdoor building, and it was perfect for my goals. So that really helped accelerate this project by at least 1 to 2 years. Some of the key design goals I had was easy access. I wanted people to move, and I didn't want the trains to be impeded by the people or vice versa. I wanted to model it the way you'd see it from the downslope. So today, if you drive this area, Interstate 80 parallels it pretty good. You're generally either looking up or looking down at the railroad, but the back of the railroad is always clinging to the side of the mountain. And about halfway up the mountain, it has to change the slope side as it goes across one of the ridges, as it moves from one valley to another. And I was actually able to capture that change in the layout itself. I do a lot with view partitioning. I also have dimmable lighting and, of course, the automation, which I'll get into. The other goal I had was, I have in the past done I did a couple of other layouts, and I had some hidden track. I really don't like hidden tracks. So I decided to go with a mostly open plan. There is a little bit of hidden track, but I have access capability to it. And also my staging is visible. It's a multi-level continuous climb layout where it goes from the low of about the Roseville staging's at about 29 inches over the floor to the summit area, which is about 102 above the floor. But I do have a raised walk-in, so sort of like a mushroom concept that is also part with a raised floor platform, so that the actual trains and track work are always within an arm's reach, or maybe one step up on a step stool. I do use step ladders in the process of building and maintenance type work, though. There's no helix. The grades are pretty close to prototypical. They're staged out. The distance between station locations is proportional to a decent amount to what really exists. So all told, I have about 1,000 feet of double track mainline when you leave one staging area till you get to the other. So we began working. I had a friend who worked with me, and he got sick a few years ago and he's since passed away, but he was very instrumental in helping me with a lot of the heavy lifting and early construction of the layout. So we basically worked for about 2 years full time just to get the building and the platform. That's the raised floor platform. And we use basically house construction. So just like you're building a house with framing, floor joists, 3/4 inch subfloor, finished floor on top, and sheetrock drywall, 2x4, 16-inch studding. So as you'll see, the layout is built very strong. So the foundation is extremely solid, so that you can in fact climb up the side of this construction. And that was key to make sure that everything stays where you want it to be, other than temperature expansion and contraction, which I've dealt with. So these show you as the construction progressed through the course of 2013. And you see the construction methodology I used is essentially I cut all the joists, if you will, these L joist type things. They'll support the bench work, which is all cut. The joists were cut from either 3/4 inch sheathing or 3/4 inch finish. I use mostly like cabinet grade finished plywood for most of everything. So many hundreds of these were cut out, and the drilled holes allow where wire routing goes. And they're cut in such a way that they form the base for the board that forms the sub road bed of the railroad. And also the bottom of them provides an area where, as you'll see, I have ceiling panels that screw into these from below, so that when you're viewing the layout, you're not looking at the wires of the level above. So there were many screws, lots of screwing, lots of gluing. And basically the screws were left in as they really were used to clamp the support in place while the Gorilla Glue set up. And the grade was moved through the layout, and actually in this earlier shot, or one of them, yeah, I don't know where it is now. Oh, you might be able to see in the far right of that photograph, if it's not covered with people there, I taped roughly, when I first went into this building, the posts, by the way, are set on 12-foot centers. So the building is 3 bays wide by 4 bays long with a 12 by 12 bay. It's all post and beam, and then it had pine board siding inside. The blue tape actually represents where the levels were going to be, and I mapped this whole room out that way, and that helped me make sure I had all the grades weren't too excessive, and also the clearance between levels was going to be okay to do maintenance. By the end of 2013, I pretty much had the main line in place, but I hadn't done any work on any of the yards at Colfax or at Truckee yet, and I hadn't done any of the maintenance away tracks, or some of the sidings were in, but some still weren't. But I was able to run trains across the layout for the first time, roughly by the end of 2013. So it took about 1.5 years or so. The track is all done with a combination. I use Woodland Scenics foam bed and Micro Engineering Flex Track, and I glue everything with the Loctite Clear Power Grab. So basically it goes on white, you spray it out, kind of like liquid nails, and then once it hardens, it dries clear, so you don't even know it's there. And you don't need to use very much at all. And I find it's a quick way to get track down. And the other nice thing about it is if you wet it if you saturate it, it'll loosen up. It's kind of a latex-based product. So it's pretty easy to work with. And also, if you need to change things out, you can also do that. Whoops. The minimum radius on my railroad is about 42 inches, although most of the main line is done with 46 on the inner track and 50 on the outer side. But the curvature also spirals a little bit from the edges in. So if the overall radius needs to be a little tighter, it kind of spirals in and then spirals back out to get around the curve based on the room available. And so far there's actually more than that, but at least well over 100 turnouts. And I build my turnouts using fast track jigs and components for the most part. I do use some of the Proto 86 guys materials when I want to build a turnout on a curve or a crossover on a curve. I generally don't solder the rail joiners, but I provide for wiring, I provide a feeder off each rail for each piece of track. So if the track's a foot long, it's got a feeder. If it's a piece of flex track, it'll have one, unless it's hidden, and then I put two on those in case I had a feeder fail in some way. And the reason I don't solder is because I need the ability for the track to move as the building expands and contracts. And I have about a 1/2 inch max from summer to winter in building growth and shrinkage along the long way. So I had to actually cut a few expansion joints the second winter as I had all the track, because any of the track I did in the summer, it didn't have enough room to shrink into in the winter, but I kind of learned my lesson with that. So I use T-tap crimps I use 12 gauge bus wire with a separate piece of wire per block. And you'll see a little bit more on that later. And I use common rail technique and of course, it's all DCC based. So I do use frog juicers on the turnouts. And most, if not, just pretty much all the turnouts are powered with the DCC accessory decoder for command control. The automation is done with a product called Train Controller, which is produced by a German company, and I'm not going to try to say his name today, but if you Google Railroad and Company on Google, you'll find it, or even Train Controller, you'll generally find this business. So basically, for me, the software comes in 3 flavors: simple, medium, and really cool. They call the gold version. They go bronze, silver, gold. Bronze is sort of like really simple. Maybe it's a good way to try it out and decide if automation's for you. But to do anything with power, you really find yourself got to go to gold pretty quickly. And again, it's just the level of functionality in the software. It runs on Windows machines, but another feature they have is they call Smart Hand, I think, which basically allows you to use any web browser interface or a smartphone, tablet, whatever, just a browser on a computer. And you can also open an interface into the software and either drive a train directly with a throttle window, or get a window that's similar to what's shown up here, where you can actually flip the turnouts, press buttons, or see the progress of a train. And I'll talk about that more as we go through. So all told, right now, I have about 150 actual blocks, and a block means a place where a train can be positioned in software. It's made up of some number of pieces of track that are sensed. And usually all my sensing is done with current sensors. I use Railroad Circuits products. And so it works just like a railroad. The train goes over the piece of track and it conducts power either through a resistor wheel set or through a lighted car or a motor with an engine with a decoder in it. And that generates occupancy, which when the software is running, it also generates what's called train tracking. So it knows when a train moves from one piece of track to the other. And with that, like, it might be a little hard to see here. We can look at it in more depth later. These are schedules, as they're referred to in train controllers. So these are the trains over here. The name, the little blue thing means the computer's running it, what its current signal is, what its current scale speed is, where it is, what block is it in, and then what schedule is it running? And is it a train set, a car, or an engine? So basically, in the world of automation for model railroads, you have cars, which are one or more freight or passenger cars. So they have definition and meaning. Things like weight, length, maximum speed, things like that. And then you have the same thing with locomotives, but they also have horsepower. So how much can they pull? And they also have acceleration and deceleration. And all that gets factored in when you build this up into a train set to make the train either go really fast or really slow, or maybe not go at all if you don't have enough power on it. And that's all possible by running the trains, not directly with the DCC throttle, which I can do, but running them through the user interface through the train controller software. That's where it brings this concept of scaled realism into the operation of the layout. And every time you couple a different engine together, you don't have to worry about consisting or changing momentums when the train is heavy or light. It does it all for you. So it's quite powerful. I do use an NCE command station, but it really works as like a dumb adapter. It adapts the information coming from the train controller software, which I could be driving a train manually through the user interface on my smartphone, or it could be the computer driving it. And that information is then turned into DCC packets through the NCE command station, sent out to all the boosters, which then go through a various amount of breakers and auto reverser breakers. And that, you see that down bottom here in this photo. So the power supply is over there, and there's actually two of these on the layout right now. The command station, the NCE, is right there. That goes up to the computer. The NCC command station doesn't drive any track. It just drives boosters, which are all optically coupled for isolation and fault resiliency, if you will. It drives each of these boosters, and typically a booster drives 2 or 3 breakers, which then drives typically 2 to 4 blocks, depending on the layout. And then all the accessory decoders turn out signals. They're all driven by separate accessory booster buses, if you will, so that they're not interfered with if a track shorts out. The turnouts can still be commanded, the signals still operate. And if there's a failure in one part of the railroad, generally speaking, like a derailment or something, the layout can keep running, and I can usually go fix a derailment if there is one. Like during a train show, I might have 1 or 2 derailments during the day. And during a train show, I typically run 20 trains continuously for usually about an 8-hour period. So that gives you a perspective, a high-level perspective of how things are put together. So here's a quick tour of the layout, and then we'll do a more in-depth tour. Count the trains. So that was a quick tour of the layout. That was about a 35-minute run of a passenger train. And I just sped that up so we could just get a quick look at everything. And the rest of the video I'll show as we go through will give you a more in-depth perspective. But the other thing I want to do is take a pause maybe and see what questions we can talk about first and give me a sense of what other things we want to focus on. So does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, hi, Chris. Greg here. Just from that little trip, it looks fantastic. And from the photos, I'm guessing it's roughly 4 levels, but is that kind of how you count it? Or with a mushroom, is it more or less?
It's kind of, I don't know, I go back and forth. It's at least 5, maybe 5.5. If you count the staging under the top of the summit area as another level. So, yeah, but because it's this continuous climb approach, you can't really say it's 4 solid levels and really 5, but I don't know, different people have said it's 5.5, it's 4.5, or so I don't know, I'll call it 5. So, but yeah, I mean, it's a lot of levels. But you know, I was wondering, I had done a smaller version of this layout in a small room in N scale down when I was in North Carolina. I wanted to prove the concept of more of that sort of open-ended diorama look by having, you know, the not too much height above each level, just enough. And I found it worked pretty good because your eye, when you're in the room, your eye focuses in on the subject, and the black fascias just, you just zoom in on what you're interested in. So if you're sort of, and we'll see a little bit of that when I do the other videos with everybody. But generally, it's funny, but it works. I don't know how else to say it. And I learned a long time ago, there's no benefit with multi-level layouts of having it go much further back than it is high. Because it's just a lot of extra scenery, and then it's hard to reach anyway. So I found that narrower isn't always worse. Sometimes narrower is better, actually, especially when it's a mountainside railroad anyway. Now, Truckey's a little more open, and Colfax is about a 3-foot depth there. As you, I don't show much of Colfax because I haven't done a lot of scenery on that side. But any other questions?
How do people walk through your layout, or do they walk upstairs to get to the various heights, or?
Yeah, actually, in the next videos, I have like a separate video slideshow thing I'm going to try to step through to sort of give everybody kind of like a walking tour of the layout with lots of train shots too, you know, moving. So, and that can run it, you know, depending on how much we talk in between and that, that's another half hour, 40 minutes worth of action. So all the video you're seeing tonight, I shot all this yesterday and today. So that's what it looks like today or yesterday. And in the course of making this video, I didn't have any derailments.
Let me ask you this. You have automation on your railroad, and you can operate the whole thing by yourself.
Yeah.
Without the automation, what size crew would you have needed in order for that to be operated?
Yeah, I think of train control. I use this term called that's a military term. I think it's called the force multiplier. And what train controller is worth is I figure it's worth about anywhere from 20 to 50 people. And my layout, if you wanted to run my layout, the amount of running it gets like during an open house, I would say you'd need, well, generally you have to have 1 person per train. Plus you need a dispatcher, and you might need some people like running, like Norden needs an operator to do the turntable and everything. And usually Truckee would need an operator, and maybe Colfax to add the helpers at each location. So I think you're talking about 20 to 20 plus people it would take to do the equivalent that I do myself with Train Controller. Just being realistic about it. I mean, you could do more people or less people, but you probably have more problems with the people because, I don't know, I've done some operating sessions, and hold your hand up if anybody hasn't run through a turnout or done something that, and the dispatcher or the layout owner is not happy at somebody at some time. It's always scary to be the new guy at an operating session because you don't know the layout that good. So the nice thing about Train Controller actually in that case is, and we do this at the museum, I volunteer at a museum, which Rich Brenton, I think, did a presentation in a couple of months back for you.
Yes.
On our, the Wakefield Freight House model railroad. And it's a small model railroad, depicts 1909, one day in 1909 in Wakefield, New Hampshire, or the line that goes through Rochester, where I live, all the way up towards Conway, at least it used to. And what we did there was we actually have it set up where Rich can have somebody drive a train, but we have safeguards so that if the operator is going to run a red signal or hit a turnout the wrong way, it'll stop the train, and the computer will stop it until they're given an appropriate clearance or they put the turnout correctly to move ahead. So there's a great way where you can still run them manually, but Train Controller can sort of be watching over your shoulder to make sure, you know, it's good to have a co-pilot, I always say.
Yeah.
Chris, I've got a question. This is Jim Murphy. I've got a question on the wiring aspect of it. You saw in the fine print there were over 20,000, 2,000 connectors and such like that. Kind of what was your methodology to get through that massive amount of wiring?
Use something that goes on easy and is if it doesn't work, you just pick another one up and crimp it on, and you don't worry about bad ones. So I buy them, you know, by the gross. They were designed, they're used in the automotive, like the stereo installation industry used to use them quite a bit in the 80s and 90s, I guess. So basically, they're, you know those 3M suitcase connectors, splice connectors?
Yes.
They're a simpler version of that. So basically, they have a blade and a I don't have one in front of me, but basically, you crimp this thing. It has a clamshell effect. You crimp it onto the bus wire, and stranded wire works best. You crimp it, and they come appropriate for the gauge wire you want to use the tap on. And then on the tap, you then crimp on the end of your feeder wire a spade, a female one, because the tap itself is the male. And you push the female, which, it has, like those crimp-on connectors with the coating around them. And you just plug that together. So if you have to troubleshoot, so a lot of people solder them. And the problem when you solder is if you have to troubleshoot a problem, you've got to undo the wiring. If you have if you're building and you made a short, you soldered up 20 wires.
Yeah.
Now the trick there is to always have your DCC meter on and keep power in the track. So if all of a sudden the light shuts off, you've just shorted out something. Because every once in a while I'd connect one backwards when I was doing it.
That's rather gutsy, keeping the power on while you're doing the wiring. My compliments.
Well, it's again, the breakers are set up to trip at 2 to 3 amps very quickly. So those PSX breakers I use are actually they're a very important safety effect, because in fact that Tam Valley booster, although it will reset, it does not stay off long enough. And originally I was just going to use those. They're about a 3 amp booster. What I found though was I had a derailment and I'd left the room for an hour. I came back and my passenger car was melting down into the track. It had derailed, and those Walthers trucks, people know what I'm talking about probably. Well, anyway, it generated, it was a resistive point, and the booster kept kicking power into it. And ultimately it started melting it. So the PSX are much better at sensing shorts and non-shorts too, and protecting for that. But generally speaking, in fact, this kind of brings up a key point. if you want to automate a railroad, you first need to build a reliable and well-running railroad. You cannot automate a problem railroad and expect the problems to go away. They will just come out 1,000-fold because now you're not running one train, fixing the problem. You know, how many of us have had a train derail? We just fix it and we move on. We don't even think twice because, well, we know we have a turnout that derails train. Well, for like the museum, they had a nice layout. It was beautifully nice. But operationally, they only ran one train ping-ponging between two automatic reversers with loops at each end. They ran a little 4-car train and, you know, it worked okay. But then when I got involved with them and they said, well, we want to do like what you're doing and we want the sound effects and we want to have 2, 3, how many trains could we run? And I said, well, we can run a few. Let's see how good the layout works. So it took us about a day once we got the parts to actually get enough sensors in. We only needed like 3 sensors and I had 2 trains running. But we quickly found out there were turnout issues. We found out there were pickup issues. There were certain wiring issues. And then we got on a course of automating and improving. And over a 2-year process, we got that layout so that it's beautiful. It runs great. And we can run that layout all day long and be talking to visitors and not worrying about derailments or dead pickup points.
Yeah.
So
Very, very good. Thank you.
yeah, there's a lot that goes into that, but that I couldn't stress it enough that if you want to automate a layout, make sure it works good first. So that means, you know, the turnouts are tuned right, the motors are, you know, the throws are good, and you know, you don't have shorting points, things like that. But there's a lot to that, unfortunately. But it's all good anyway, because it works whether you're driving the train or the computer's driving the train.
Chris?
Yes.
Chris, this is Rich Breton. I have a picture of one of those connectors that I used from my presentation, if someone wants to see it quickly.
Oh, great. Throw that up. Yeah. Hi, Rich. Yeah, there they are.
So this was from my presentation that I made, like I said, about a month and a half ago. So when Chris is talking about those T-taps, there's one over here that's for a 12, 14 gauge wire. And then it has another, spade connector that just pushes into it. Here's a case where we made a change and we didn't use it anymore. So it's fantastic for troubleshooting and things like that. But Chris put me onto these things. They're very reliable. And once you have them in place, it's very easy to make changes and things like that. So that's what they look like, though. That they come in different colors, and they're for different gauge wires. They have yellow, heavier, blue for like 18, and the 22 and smaller are red ones. So, but they're really, really handy for all kinds of things. And I found out now they have them in black, which is for the very small wiring, and that's useful for like layout, structure wiring and stuff like that. So, okay, that's all. I'm gonna stop sharing that. So,
Where did you get yours?
I buy them on Amazon. I buy like 100. I buy them like 500 a time for like, they're only a few cents each. So so what happens is sometimes you'll crimp one on and it won't go right. You just peel it off, throw it, do another one. They're cheap enough that you're not like worrying about every little one of them you do. And if you got to do hundreds or thousands, it's much better. And I really not into soldering up under the layout or in that. So everything I try to do is with some kind of insulation displacement connector or crimp style connectors. And I've had very good results with that. So.
Okay, thank you.
So I can start. What I want to try to do now is I didn't really edit all my videos together, but I kind of put them into a slideshow format so I could kind of choreograph how we can go through it. And I can jump around if needed, or but these videos will give us, it's kind of a tour of the layout room itself. And then as we go through, we can try to address other questions and things. And then after that, if there's more interest, I can focus on any specifics, like more in the automation or how I build the buildings, things like that.
Just a heads up, when you do share the videos on the screen share, there should be a button that lets you optimize it for videos. So that way, instead of it stuttering, we'll all be able to all see it smoothly.
Yeah, I think that'll work. So let me know if there's a problem. Oops. Wait a minute. I gotta pick it up first. Let me get that.
I looked them up and I even found these things at Walmart.
And there you go.
T-tap connectors. And they're most of them only go down to like 22 gauge, but I guess they have another size for the really small stuff.
Yeah, they usually don't go much smaller than that for the T-taps, but the you know, they're typically from like 12 gauge down towards that. Okay, I want to try to, all righty. So does that look all right to you guys?
Yep, that looks good.
Okay, so there's a bunch, I did all this video yesterday and I just did it with my iPhone on a tripod. So it's not too jerky. So this is as you walk up the stairs into the train room, which is up on the second floor in my barn. So, and again, the room itself is about 34 feet wide and about 47 feet long inside. So this is looking to the left as you walked up the stairs, and there's a couple of windows there. And you see this train is now headed east. So on the outside of the room, the trains follow the walls around the room. So so this area will not really have any like 3D terrain with it, but it will be scenic with basic and ballasted in that. In fact, that one section above here, this is going to be a storage tracks area. I'm going to have 3 tracks up here. I may someday build a branch line along here, kind of hanging over the front on like a mountainside look, filling in above and below that. But that's like a dream to be dreamed kind of thing. So here we're coming into the, that was a look at the one of the buildings I built. This is looking down the center aisle. So the layout has two main fingers. So it has 3 fingers sort of you can walk in, or 3 valleys, if you will. And this is in the middle one. So this is as you go up the stairs, if you turn to the left, this is what you would be seeing. And so the lowest level here is 29 inches, and then it's I don't know, it's a little over 3 feet here, but it's climbing, and the same above, and then it's climbing the opposite direction. And there'll be more videos showing the different areas a little better. Some of these first ones are more just give you the broad brush. So there's a typical freight train. So there's a fruit train, which was one of the main commodities, green fruit being moved east. PFE reefers. So those are mechanically iced. So there's a cab forward on the point. There's one in the mid train. And then there's one. Now I put my helpers on the rear because it's easier to do with the computer, but typically that would be like 2 cars, 4 cars in real life, or 2 cars up on the scaled train. And for people that don't know, the cab fort was developed specifically for trains over Dorner Pass because of the many tunnels, and the freight crews were being asphyxiated and overcome with the fumes in the tunnels. And Southern Pacific figured they could turn the Malley around because they use fuel oil, not coal. So you can pump the oil to the front, and well, the rest is history. It worked perfect. So this is at the very end there. You see a location, Blue Canyon. That's right where snow country would begin on the rail railroad, roughly. So that's about half, that's about up at, oh, I want to say about 4,000, 4,500 feet. So I do have labels around the layout that will give you information about the location, what milepost it is, and what its elevation was on the real railroad. So that building, all the buildings you'll see, I designed and built with 3D design using Fusion 360, and then I cut them with a laser cutter I purchased, and modified. And I make, these chimneys are bought ones, but most of my chimneys and other details now I make with a 3D resin printer, similar to the one that the other gentleman showed how he made all those little animal figures and things. And as I mentioned, these are block signals. They're approach lit, and they're all function per the prototype. And that little green structure is actually 3D printed. That was one of the first things I 3D printed, but that's done with a filament printer. And that was where Central Pacific housed all the batteries and relays for the signaling system. So you see those along the line. So above we see a train going, go ahead. Somebody ask a question?
I think something got picked up in the background.
Okay, so we see this train now. This lower one here is coming up into the Immigrant Gap area, and the one above it is actually headed east as well. But he's up now on the other side of the slope, so we're on the opposite side of him. And that train is going through the Yuba Pass area. And this is actually up there is where the city of San Francisco was snowbound in January 1952 for 3 or 4 days. And there's some video online that you can find on YouTube where you can actually see the old documentaries of that. But you'll see the signals go out up there as the train leaves the block. Well, maybe. Oh, maybe this one will do it. And also you see on the left side, you see the blue ceiling panels, and on the right, you don't see that part because I was working up under there. So I have them removed at this time. And the tape is holding the lights and the clips hold the lighting, and it's all LED lighting. So when it's all put back together, it'll look a little neater than that. So there's my one and only bridge to date. So that's Butte Canyon. And then the area right after it is called Shed 10. And there's an important set of crossovers there. They're actually CTC crossovers. At least one of them was. So this train is actually going to cross, or no, there's another train that'll cross over. But, so that's typical of what would run in the 50s, where we'd have either diesel on the front or steam on the front, and either steam in the helpers. It would take 3 cab forwards to get one of these trains across the mountain, or it would take a set of 4 F units, typically F7s, and 1 cab forward cut in near the rear helping. Sometimes when they first started using the F7s, when they started bringing them in this area in like 49, early 50, sometimes the F4s would be cut in the mid-train as helpers actually. But then they quickly learned they were better as point engines. So this is the train order office at Immigrant Gap, and it actually sits between the rails. This is the farther side over, and this shows a train descending down towards Shed 10. So it's coming down off the top. It's in an area called Cisco, and eventually there'll be a building right about here. The Cisco section crew house will be located roughly in this area. There is a signal bridge there, but I have it out because I just did all this hard shell scenery over the last week, in fact. So, and I can talk about how I produce my hard shell. I use a 2-part expanding polyurethane foam laminate with window screen to produce all this. It produces a lightweight, quick to set hard shell that then you can either do plaster on top or just put your scenery right over it. And then you see, that's what's used on most of the three-dimensional terrain on the layout. You see it above there as well. So there you can see, you see the staging is actually under the bottom here. So that would be the first level, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then there's staging under there. So kind of 5.5 is how I think of it.
Chris,
Yes.
TC, with that much train, how much heat and power you think you saved by using LEDs?
Oh, yeah. Well, I can tell you, I run all that with one PC power supply with a 12-volt power supply that puts out 12 volts. And I'm only running it at I'm probably up around 600 to 700 watts right now. But I still have to probably add about twice as much lighting by the time I'm done. So I use PC supplies. I don't know if I have a picture of one. And they're really good for running LEDs. And I pulse modulate the LEDs with, I basically created a dimmer by using I built my own Arduino-based mobile decoder, but the train controller sees the speed of that engine called dimmer, and from 0 to 100, which is really 0 to 100% lights on. So I tied that all in, but basically when it's on full blast, it's probably 700 to 800 watts. But I think to create that much light another way, you'd probably be looking at I would think 3 to 4 times that much power. You know, traditional lighting. I do have some fluorescence, but there are also LED fluorescence up top.
And you say you use foam and screen for the hard shell?
Yeah, and I can get into that more with a separate little bit of video later if you want to learn more about that. I'm thinking I'm actually going to do a clinic on that for our local modeling group, because everyone who comes here, including the guys who came today, everyone asks me, how do you do that? So I like it better because it's simpler for me to do this. You can shape it quicker, simpler than doing plaster, and it sets up quick and you can put scenery over it in like an hour. You don't have to wait really. So it's a process that takes, well, rather than try to describe it now, I think I'd rather save that for a separate discussion, if that's okay. But
another guy uses foam and paper towels, but it takes like overnight to set up.
No, I'll show you how I do it. If we have time, I can do that.
Very interesting.
So you can see there's a lot of scenery the scenery work really got going in 2016. And since this year, my wife wanted to help on the layout because she was getting bored not having anything to do since April. So she asked to come over and I showed her how to paint people and do scenery and ballast, and she's an ace ballaster. So she's already done a couple 100 feet or probably 300 feet of ballasting, a double track ballasting for me. And boy, it's really great when you get somebody who likes doing ballasting. So there's that nice long freight. So now it's heading up through the tunnels that Yuba passed there. And so I tried to get these roughly in order, but so again, all these sequences were shot with the trains were just running continuously. So now we're over on the far side of the layout. So this is where I have a workbench on the inside side. So this is the outer wall to the right, and it was a knee wall that I had to bring in 2 feet because the barn has a much steeper sloping roof on that side. So now we're going to see a helper engine coming in, and it's going to slow down. You saw the headlight extinguished, and it's going to couple up to this train, which is actually a Western Pacific detour over the Southern, over Donner. So I guess they had a washout on the Feather River. And
this is all computer operated, right?
Yeah, I'm not doing any of it. Well, I did it, but the computer's doing it. Yes. So the computer knew how far to bring that train in, slowed it down, and coupled up, pushed up the slack. Now he'll blow a few signals. The head end will pump air and they're out of here. So that's the power of computer automation. So all the signaling you hear, the whistles, the bells, the lights, you see some crossing gates go down up there maybe. It's all done by programming or really configuring train controller, learning how to use it slowly at first. Now I started using train controller in 2007. It took me a long time to learn how to do all this really cool stuff. But even with a little bit of effort, you can do some pretty neat stuff pretty quick. So now we're in the upper level of the layout. We just went up the stairs and there's a swing door with 5 tracks that go across it that opens, and it's interconnected, it's interlocked to the layout. So if a train is coming, some red LEDs flash like a railroad crossing, and the doors have a magnetic lock on them, and you can't open the door if a train's coming. Once the train goes by, the door unlocks, the lights go out, and you can go up and down. And the door's a Dutch door with no bottom. So if you're really in a hurry, you can duck under the door and slide out or up. So that's the one way up to the top of the layout. So now I guess if you use the mushroom terminology, we went up inside the mushroom. So that train is leaving Norden and heading down the mountain westbound. So Norden is covered over, at the time was covered entirely in wooden snow sheds. There were some concrete ones, but most of them were wood. I have not built the wooden snow sheds, but I bought a new larger laser where I hope to do my wooden snow shed project this winter. So I have to build roughly 50 to 100 feet of snow sheds. So I'm hoping that using the power of the laser, I can do that in a more production-oriented way. So this helper has been cut off, turned, and has now been sent to return to Colfax. We see another helper cutting off the back of a train, and it's going to pull down, and then eventually it'll pull forward up the siding so it can get over and get on the turntable. Some of this may be a little out of order, so. And you hear all these commands and signals, and basically one set of actions will lead to another set of actions, and based on a set of conditions, certain things happen. So here we've cut away the helpers, and the train is now beginning its descent downgrade, about a 20-mile descent down into Truckee. We see a train over on the left, which is on the cookhouse siding up there on the summit siding. That train has just come over the pass, actually, on the #1 track, the original line around Donner. And there's actually another train pulling up on the main that's going to stop. You see the turntable in the foreground, and either in this video or the next one, one of these trains is going to jump over and get on that turntable. So all this you see happening, remember, I'm the cameraman today doing this, which was actually Monday I was doing it. I think it was Monday. And yeah, so here, this train is now moving. And this video may be a little long, so kind of bear with me as it moves through. So now we see the helpers that cut off that freight that's still heading out of town up there. That freight is heading into Tunnel 41, which they call the Big Hole. It's a 10,000 plus foot tunnel. It was bored in 1925, and that's how they double tracked the summit. They had modern tunneling so they could produce a bore that went straight through Mount Joder, I think it's called. And basically it cut 2 miles off the route. So the #1 track, which is the westbound track, actually still ran up around through all the snow sheds, around the peaks, and then through a few of it kind of skimmed the edge of the mountains, but then it had to go through the summit tunnel, which was the famous tunnel that the Chinamen blasted out in the late 1860s, and with black powder, because they found out nitro was a little too powerful. So many people died to to make this railroad a reality in the late 1860s, but it ultimately led to the great expansion west of the country, and it linked the country together. So this locomotive backed on the turntable. Now, I physically uncoupled the locomotive from the trains, and when they get on the turntable, I just press a button, it spins the turntable and tells the computer I've done that. But other than that, it's just button presses for me. I have a small, like an iPad underneath there. And when I just tell it the train's ready. So basically I'm telling it, yes, I uncoupled it. Now you can move it. Yes, it's definitely on the turntable and I'm swinging it. So then the computer knows, so it stays in sync basically. And then when it gets to the end, the next thing we'll do is it'll move off that turntable. Wait for it. I don't know how long or what's going to happen next. So all this video, by the way, this whole process, I was probably shooting for maybe 3 to 4 hours total yesterday. And of course, the layout never dimmed. I had the dimmer set off. But normally when my layout operates, it goes through day to night. And so I'm investing a lot in building lighting and of course the signals and the locomotives with their lights and the passenger trains, many of those are lit, because it really is exciting to see the operation in the dim, of the moonlight, if you will. Okay.
Now, what I've heard with like very small layouts, they use a lot of times the modeler does really super extremely detailed stuff because, well, the layout gets built real quickly and all that. My assumption is that you're not going to be as super detailed because you're doing a more broader.
Well, I appreciate that as a way of looking at building. I look at it this way. I want to make the layout look pretty good from between 1 foot and 2 feet away to the average person. So I started about 4 feet away, and I say, what do I got to do to make it look good from 2 feet away? And the basic thing there is I don't want to see any plywood. I don't want to see any white, or just the foam. So base ground cover, terrain and ground cover. And then the next thing I look at is, well, what's going to make it a little more interesting? Track side features. The signals, probably number one, operating signals, but like these water and oil columns and structures. So that's the approach. But as I do each of those things, I'm not going to go and look for the most nth level of detail in any one of them at that time. But at the same time, I always reserve the right when I get everything to that level of 1 to 2 foot level of, nicety and detail, that then I'll look at the 6-inch to 12-inch interest in detail. So like how nice are the figures? Can you see in the buildings and see interiors? Or the people in the train cars and things like that. Like I've added local engineers to the locomotives and that. So depending on what we're talking about, my ultimate goal is to keep kind of getting down till the point where I too will want a beaver to put on my layout, or maybe several animals in various odd places that will become interesting scenes. But in all honesty, I'm still years away from achieving that point in my journey with this layout.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, gentlemen, I actually need to wander off because I have another meeting soon and all that. So very nice presentation, Chris. And I'll see you guys on Saturday.
Thanks, Ed.
Thank you. So this one's a little long, but you're seeing so this is the action at Norden. Now it got a little busy here because I wasn't watching, I was filming. So then I had to make sure I got some of these helpers cut off and got these trains moving. So it did get a little congested. Normally it wouldn't be this congested, but you do see what's occurring here. And Yeah. I'm gonna skip ahead a little. So now this train is descending. So when they descend, so from basically from Norden down to Truckee on my layout, it's the equivalent of what today we call CTC. And from Norden down to Immigrant Gap, it's CTC. So the trains could run on either main. So the main lines are signaled for both, you know, traffic flow, both directions, both mains. And from Immigrant Gap down through Truckee down to Roseville, it's signaled for right-hand running direction of traffic, automatic block control with train orders. But the computer basically does the train orders because it's the dispatcher. So here's a good shot. You see looking down over Norden here. And you can see those diesels spinning on the turntable as a train comes down, and that helper moves up. And that helper will actually pull up and then back down on the lead for the turntable. And then after, I think this may be the last look at Norden, then we're going to switch over and see Truckee in more detail. And that's where I have a lot more work on structures, so we can get into how I do the structures more there. These structures you see here were very early prototypes as I was learning to use my design tools and lasers. So I've learned to do a little better. So essentially the buildings though are all built kind of like you'd buy a laser kit, except I build my own little kit for myself. So the concept's the same. They go together, tab and slot, peel and stick, just add glue and paint kind of approach. And I paint all my buildings, I airbrush them either as parts and then I do some weathering when they're done. So the important thing to remember here is all of these trains at all these locations are all under the power of that one computer, and it doesn't have any, it's not like power hungry in terms of what you need for computing power to do these things, by the way. Any reasonably modern Windows PC or laptop is sufficient. In fact, the computer I'm running this on is actually, I bought it in 2012. So it's, I mean, by today's standards, it's pretty old. So now we're coming down into Truckee. So now we're up at the top level and we just turned to the other side of the aisle. So that's about a 3-foot wide aisle. My aisles are generally 3 feet or more wide. And the goal again is so that people can move freely back and forth without really having to squeeze by each other, which is really important during the train show or open house days. So these are some of the buildings I've done with the laser. These are some of the more elaborate buildings that I've done as I've become more capable with the tools. And I had no idea how to do any of this 2 years ago when I finally said I'm going to learn how to do it. And I bought a laser and I started learning how to do 3D design. So all the buildings you see here, I built, with the exception of the depot I did last year. All the rest, I started working on those in January. I did the hotel, took about 2 months, and most of that was design time. So it takes about and then this is a building I'm working on. It's not fully figured how it's going to be, but that was some prototypes I put in. So now we have a train coming out of the Sparks staging and it's coming on scene here. So this is westbound into Truckee. This is the city of San Francisco, which was a famous train the Southern Pacific and Union Pacific ran between Oakland Pier and Chicago. daily. They ran it daily from 1947 up and through the 60s. It ultimately became today's California Zephyr, sorta. The train order signs actually move up and down based on train controller commands. They're actually driven by 2 servos. And the building's lights, in fact, you see in the hotel there, the upstairs of the hotel were the bedrooms. So those lights are actually on a little Arduino microcontroller, and they turn on and off in a kind of, it's sort of a randomized sequential pattern that I developed to give it a lived-in look overnight in that, because people would come at all hours of the day and leave there. So you would typically see people coming in and going. Sometimes train crews would sleep there until they were called too. So Truckee was a railroad town. Truckee now is a tourist town. The depot, the gas station, and the freight station actually still exist. The car shed was recently torn down. And where my backdrop is where the street begins. So across that street is the main drag of Truckee, and it looks today much like it looked in 1950. So if you go to Google Maps and use that aerial view down over Truckee, that's what it looked like. And you can actually find some pictures of it in 1950. And I actually use those to help me create these buildings. So now we're going to kind of look across and over across from Truckee. So that's about a 5-6 foot gap across there, what you see in the distance. That's actually Donner Pass. That's the #1 main as it comes around through a tunnel. I think that was tunnel 8 maybe, or tunnel, oh God, I can't remember the numbers. So as it comes out of here, it's about to cross what is referred to as the Chinese Wall or the China Wall. So that was cut stone piece by piece, built up by the Chinese who worked this area, who also cut through these granite rocks to form the tunnels. That little underpass you see there is the original Donner Pass wagon road. That was the road the settlers used until the railroad was built. And this looks like it looked in the 60s through the 90s. They blew this rock out. They took down all the wooden snow sheds and they put these prefab concrete ones in. So one of my goals is over the next year or two is to convert this so it looks like what it looked like in 1951, where it would have been all wooden snow sheds. And they would have extended further. And we're coming to the end of most of the video here, I believe. Yeah. So now we've kind of walked down past Truckee and we have to step down and we step under where the tracks go across into staging. And now we're in the staging area, which I call Sparks. And whoops, that went quick. So in here, the trains enter on the left side. So this is the underneath that scene you saw where the train was just running over Donner Pass. And then they come around. So that part's a little bit hidden, but it is accessible. They come around and then this part is much more visible. And you can see I have a lot of modern equipment parked here. I only run that for like open house days because a lot of people today, where's the modern diesels and things. So I keep those to run for that. I got stack trains and auto traffic, and then I got a mixed freight that's 7 engines and like, I don't know, it's 50 some odd cars. It's like 60 feet long. So just like today, it takes forever to go across the crossings. But some people like that. And so I guess, now I got some other things. Whatever questions there are, we can then go in an area of interest. And I have some information about how I do the hard shell, if you want to see it, or I have some information like a lot of where do I get my information. These show some pictures and things like different areas. little bit of the tools I use. I got one of those little $300 resin printers. I got a bigger one somewhere, but it's not resin, it's the other kind. This is my new laser in the back. Whoops. This is the new laser I just got. I have a friend make me a stand to lift it up. And this is the laser I built all those buildings on. It's a K40 Chinese laser. It's a 40-watt laser. It'll cut about an 8 by 12, maybe 8.5 by 12-inch area. It's really good though if you do a little bit of work to it. But so I paid $400 for that laser, but I bought some stuff to make it good, and that my net cost on that's about I don't know, $1,100 maybe, $1,100. This one I just got delivered about a month or so ago. This one will do about a 2 foot, it's a little bigger, but 2 by 3 foot surface. So I can cut anything that big. And this is 100 watts. So I could probably cut up to almost a 3/4 inch piece of plywood in it if I wanted to. But I don't have any plans to do that. So if you're not familiar with lasers, they're very simple. You feed them essentially a drawing that's a raster type drawing. And it either, or you can give it like a picture too, and it'll actually like take that picture and it will scan it by adjusting the speed and power of the laser beam back and forth, kind of like it's drawing a picture by burning it into the wood typically. So that's why these are usually actually referred to as laser engravers. But if you increase the power, they'll burn right through the subject. So it's a factor of speed of the movement of the laser and level of power in the beam. So you have a beam power of so much, which typically you never run more than say 80% of the design rating of the beam, and that way the beam itself lasts a lot longer. And then what you do is you pulse the beam, you pulse modulate it, so you essentially, just like you dim the lights, you dim the laser in a way. I'm kind of simplifying it, obviously. And it cuts out whatever you want based on what you feed it through the computer. Now, to get the information right that you feed it to, that's where all the 3D design work comes in. And that's like 80% of the work to make a building. The laser cutting work takes usually I'm on the laser for like, out of like that hotel building, there's probably less than a day or two of laser work to make all the 500 or so parts that went into that hotel. And that building and all those buildings you saw up there, I just got this new one. They were all done on this little one. So you can really build a building very long on a little one, but you have to siamese the parts together. But that's what I did. But I learned a lot and I got more confidence. So this laser is about a little over a $3,000 machine, but it comes with everything you need. So that's my workbench basically right there. What else? That's the crate it came in. Oh, up behind here, that's my spray booth area. So this is the main level of my barn, and I actually have a basement under my barn, which is a full-size basement too. So that's an oscilloscope to do the electronic work with. And there's the little 3D resin printer. And these basically just shoot layer after layer and it grows up the part out. So a 3D printing is done by slicing a 3D object into slices. And then the build plate actually comes up out of the resin. And each time you do a slice, it shoots a picture, an ultraviolet LCD screen shoots an image, and you're developing it like film. If you think of it as like, like exposing film, that's how that works. And then you have to cure it in a UV oven when it's done. But they're very consumer oriented now, thank God, because now you can build exactly what you want. Like those chimneys, I build exactly the chimney I want for the project. Screen shoots an image and you're developing it like film. If you
Hold on. I think I see what's going on. That's Clark.
That's how that works. And then you have to cure it in a UV oven when it.
Give me just a sec. Oh, there we go. Never mind. He muted. Never mind. He got it himself.
Okay. Yeah, that's how you do it. So it's now the challenge in that, just like the laser, is you kind of got to learn your speeds and feeds. Like if you've ever done machining or anything, you kind of learn for this material, you can do this or that. It's the same with these devices, but generally they give you some good info to get you in the ballpark, and then a little bit of trial and error, and usually you can get it pretty quick. If you don't try to do anything too tricky, I find they work pretty much out of the box. So I don't know, go for it. That's my attitude. Okay. So train controller, I got a few little images here, but I can actually go to a live screen and we can spend more time on that if you want. This is actually the museum, this view. So this is the museum's control panel, which is train controller. So these were just some screenshots. So this is a screenshot of what you use your handheld device to drive a train with. So it has a throttle here. It's grayed out because the computer is actually driving this train. It tells you your train you're driving up top, tells you your speed. Normally these would be like, if they're grayed out, it means the computer's driving it. But they'd be green if you're going forward, orange if you're going backward. And this lower one here is the air brake. So you can put on the brake a little or a lot. These two red lights are your home signal and your distance signal. These are your resources. This is a steam engine, so it has water and coal, I guess. And then these are your function buttons. So instead of knowing function 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all that kind of stuff, they're symbolic. So you can put any symbol over any actual numbered function, and you can actually make these buttons do multiple functions. You configure train control to do that. So then you can click on this button and it would take you to this screen where you actually see the layout. And now you can press on these turnouts and throw a switch. You can pick a train, like this orange box train is the one that these lower buttons apply to. And that upside down cup means if you press that, you terminate the schedule that train's running, it'll stop. These are little symbols to like lock entry or exit from blocks. Now a block, most people think of a block as a section of track with signals in it. Train controller thinks of it as a section of track that can hold a train, but they're really the same thing. In practical purposes, they're the same. These little lights here, some are red and some are white because my signals are all approach lit. So some of these they're white unless they're lit. When they light, they default to red unless they have there's a clearance to make them either yellow or green. So this is the West Norden interlocking here, which kind of starts here, goes through these two crossovers, incorporates this is the fire train siding, and also all the way up to the turntable, and then it comes through the station track here, and then through to the siding and the eastbound mains here. So this interlocking is actually pretty complex. And this is all controlled through train controllers. So all the aspects of the signals, they're not programmed into hardware anywhere. They're just configured behind this. And in fact, I'll jump to another screen if you want to see details on that, how that's done. But that's how train controller is configured. You go into the edit mode, and behind every one of these things is logic. But you define the logic in simple human understandable terms. It's not like writing a program. They wrote the program, it interprets the configuration data as it runs, and it works good.
Chris, somebody told me that using this is kind of like you're asked a question, you answer the question. And it's as simple as that. I mean, it's no programming, no computer whiz required.
Yeah, I'm gonna pick a different thing to show you. Yeah, here's this is train controller running on the computer next to me. It's running in a sim mode. So it's my layout, it's the same file, but I'm simming it. So this is how I develop new schedules and test out ideas they have a wonderful feature, which you see down bottom here, called the simulator. So basically, this lets you learn to use and test train controller for your layout before you ever have to connect it to your layout. And when people learn what this means and start to understand how to use it, this allows you to, if you will, learn how to do more things without the fear of breaking the things you already do. Because you can save the file you're using, take a copy of it, and experiment with it. And when you learn the rights and wrongs of it and get it the way you want it, you can then move that to the file you use to run the trains with on the actual layout. And that's what I do. I actually, when I'm testing, like when I was working with the museum, I was actually simming the museum layout on 6 of my own computers at home, because I wanted to find all the gotchas in all the routines I created, because I never wanted trains to get stuck. So when you create dispatching rules, which all these flags represent dispatching rules, they're little pieces of logic in here. So the upper ones on my layout, generally, the upper ones mean a passenger train is coming. The lower ones mean a freight train is coming. The passengers have higher priority than the freight. So when the freight see a passenger coming, they have to get out of the way. So they find nearest siding if possible. And that's kind of the real simplistic way of describing a lot of my automated dispatching. So I have a dispatching engine that I've created, and I run it in auto or I run it in manual mode. In manual mode, I have to tell where I want the trains to go, just like a real dispatcher would do. So it's like running a CTC panel, the way a lot of people do on their layouts. The dispatcher actually sets up the signals, clears the turnout. Like this train just entered the OS here at Immigrant Gap, if you can see my cursor up here. So he's locked the OS, so he's on, on sheet, they call OS, which means he's inside the interlocking. So this is a very small interlocking here. It's got 3 turnouts. And that was the interlocking that was basically run by that little shack that sits between the tracks up there. That's Immigrant Gap. That's where that little building is. So basically my layout goes from the bottom left to right, and then it connects back over here, and it goes. So as you go left to right and up, you're going eastbound. And then I have another sheet here because it couldn't fit on one screen. And now this is the upper part of my layout. So we just walked up the stairs. And when you look to the right, you see all the track on the bottom side. That's Norden. That's where we saw the trains turning on the turntable. So there's Norden interlocking. And that's a pretty complex interlocking. And then Truckee, I actually have I have the Norden interlocking actually goes down through shed 47, which is actually way up high on the far wall. This crossover is 8 feet above the ground, above the floor. So we really want those turnouts to work good. And then the trains come down into Truckee, and there's a turnout right at Truckee. Now that wasn't under interlocking until much later than the 50s. So I may in fact take that out if I want to get more historically accurate, but it does aid a little bit in how I operate the layout. So again, from these screens, like you can go in, like I can turn any, if you watch here, you see the little switch lantern there? Now I can't flip this turnout because I have this interlock here. So this turnout's locked. So first I have to unlock it by pressing that button, and now I can switch it. So you can put these features in at will, and you can get as complex as you want. Now I can manually change a signal, but generally speaking, the train control is going to override a manual change. These are the train order boards. So I can either set them diagonally, which means there's orders, but you don't stop for them. You pick them up on the fly. Green, no order, or red, stop, come into the office. So Truckee had 2 order boards, one for each direction. So you can see how I've linked the computer, or the layout is is represented and linked into the computer. Any questions? No.
Awestruck. I think what you've done is just unbelievable.
Well, thank you. And sometimes, you know, I remember one day I went in there when the scenery was starting to take shape, and I finally took a minute and I looked at it. And I got to tell you, I kind of felt that way myself, because for like 2-3 years, I wasn't looking at the whole thing. I was just looking at what I was doing on it. And when we did the first open house in I think it was 20 November, we do them on Thanksgiving weekend. And I think the first one I did was, I actually did a tour of the local Seacoast Division group. And I think we had about 40 or so model railroaders come. And that was in May of 2017. And then I had about 80 people come in in November well, maybe it was actually close to 100 the first year. And that was that November. So it was really nice to see the interest and to watch the people's appreciation of what we've achieved here. So thank you.
What's your next project for the computer?
Well, I just finished a big computer project I was working on part-time while I was doing a lot of the scenery work this summer. I've gone to an operating timetable now. So now trains leave staging against the real-time clock operating on a timetable. And let me see if I can make that bigger. So here's the timetable. And you can see there's many entries here. And basically, they're typically, now on this line, they typically would send a freight east about every 90 minutes and west about, depends, but every 90 minutes, except during rush hour. And then they might be firing them off on 60-minute headways. And then the passenger trains would kind of run in a little bit of a pulse. In the 1950 timeframe, there were 5 passengers running both directions. There was the city of San Francisco, which ran daily. That was train 101 and 102. There was another train, I think it was the Overland. I forget the number. I think it might have been 21 or 25 and 26, but I could be wrong. Then there was a mail train, the fast mail. And then there were 2 other passenger trains, but I don't think it was called the Challenger then. I think they stopped using that name after World War II. But anyway, there was a total of 10. So sprinkled in this thing, I have the passengers get to Colfax roughly when they did on the real timetable, and they come through Truckee roughly at that time. So that really mixes things up, because if somebody wants to switch or run a local across the layout and maybe switch some of the sidings that I'm in the process of adding to the layout, because there was a little bit of industry along the line, not much, but enough. And then there was a decent amount of business in Colfax in 1950. They actually had some fruit packing there. They had fuel delivery. There was a lumber delivery yard there, and similar things in Truckee. So there are some switching job opportunities. So the idea being now the trains on the main line are running under the timetable, and you got to check with the operator if you need to get out on the main to switch an industry that's on the other side of the tracks or something. But that's an example of now how I've just set the layout up with train controller now, but to have it worked with actual operators. And it's really going to make the job of operating a little more challenging, if you will. So now I could be doing the switching job at Truckee or at Colfax, and train control is doing everything else. Or I could be the dispatcher, and maybe there's 6 or 8 people here who are running the jobs. And I could make their lives difficult. But yeah. I promise I wouldn't do that. So, but the other nice thing about train controller is if things are getting a little too hard, we can shut off the real-time clock and stop things from, we can stop schedules from starting. So if we get a little behind, we can stop the clock very easily. let me get this back out of the way. Just put it here for now. So the real-time clock here, the nice thing about this clock is, let me come up to how we deal with the clock. Yeah, we can bring up the properties of the clock. And right now I'm running the scale time at 6:1. So 24 hours is 4 hours. So we could slow that down, 4:1. We could jump it up 8:1. Now on a train show, I run it like up around, I don't know, 12, usually 12 to 15:1. And that way the dimmer goes up and down like really quick. So people get a quick look at the nighttime. And I usually cut out some of the night. You can cut out a segment of time so you can jump. So at midnight I could jump to 6, which is actually, it looks like how it's set up here, I think right now. So all this stuff can occur while the system's running actually. These features do not require you to actually go in edit mode. So these are some of the nice things you have. So I just pressed that button up there to turn the clock. So now you see the clock is moving. So the I don't know, hope that helps a little. Whoops.
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Let me see how to fix this a little bit. It's always fun to put them back where you had them. So this is called docking windows. And it's good though, because this is a nice way to set up train control. You usually want to have a block. So if you want to watch a train, like we can jump on this train and watch him go around. He probably won't go too fast. I think they're running. So as this train moves from block to block, this window will change. And actually, I want to make this bigger. So you see all these little arrows under here. These are what are called the markers. These gray things are action markers. The red ones are stop markers. You got to at least have a stop marker in each direction. You can have more than one. And then these yellow ones are brake ramps or brake markers. So they tell the train when to slow down, and this one tells it when to stop. And the way it knows when to start, slow down or stop is when it entered the block, it created a time event. So when this block just went active, you just saw these two light up. So let's go to this block. Well, whoops, can't really. Let's go over to the next block here. I think I'm on it. So now we just saw him come in here. So now these timers start, and train controller starts a timer every time a sensor goes off, and it knows how much speed the train has. So it calculates based on the distance you set for this, how long it should take to get to that. And when it gets that time, it turns that marker on and does whatever it's got, tells it to do behind it. So every one of these has a little bit of information behind it. Tells where it is and what to do when it trips. And that's how train controller works in a nutshell. So you can see them going and it'll just keep moving along. And we'll get this back out of the way. Oops.
Chris, Paul Bond here.
Yeah.
Do you interchange with the Nevada County narrow gauge at Colfax?
Say that again now?
Do you interchange with the Nevada County narrow gauge at Colfax?
No, unfortunately, they pulled that up in 43, I think, and sold it to the, they moved it to, I think it went to Hawaii because they needed the rail and, you know, during the war effort then. So I model, my target is 48 through say 57. If it did exist or could have existed, then I might model that. But unfortunately, that narrow gauge line was no longer there. So the short answer is no, I don't.
Hi, Chris. Sorry, I came in a little late on your presentation. It seems fantastic. You may have mentioned this before. What are you using for the actual block pickup? So are you using
infrared or are you using,
Oh, yeah. No, I use current sensing. I use railroad circuits products mostly and current sensing. So I have resistor wheel sets.
right?
Not all the cars, but many. Train controller, by the way, does not require every car to have detection. It has a method, it has features that can allow it to work with if only the lead car. So if the train's gonna back up though, then the lead car going backwards would need to have a way to trip detection. In my case, a resistor wheel set.
Sure.
So I sense current flow just like the real railroads would. And it's all based on railroad circuits products, which I highly recommend. They're really good. Once you learn, you know, they're very easy to start using. And my sensor networks use LocalNet, which is actually the Digitrex standard, but Railroad Circuits builds products to that standard.
Right.
And train controller interfaces very well to LocalNet.
Okay.
And it provides very good response time to bring the many hundreds of sensing points I have back to the computer.
Yeah. I was gonna say, you must have quite a few detection spots on that layout.
Yeah.
I'm just kind of, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so there's, I would say somewhere in the area of about 300 and counting. So some blocks only have one. Like if I click on a block, it's kind of easy to tell. Like this block has 2. Most blocks have between 2 and, gotta pull this out of here, sorry. So what you see here, it's broken into different pieces. So that's a detector section or a sensor.
Right.
So this one has 3 at least. Some have much more. I don't know if I could find one. But certain areas where, and by the way, I have sensors under each turnout too. So you know when the train's in the turnout.
Right.
And I use that for protection of the turnout and also to create what's called the OS. He's on sheet or he's in the interlock.
Right. Okay. I heard you mention the Arduino and that. You ever thought about using the Arduino for detection or?
I'm doing some work with some new stuff that I'm actually working on some more manageable boosters, breaker type devices. So my current project is kind of in power distribution and reliability and scalability.
Okay.
With management feedback, if you will. But I've looked at it. I mean, there's no limit to what you could do with them.
Oh yeah.
I've seen people do detectors with Arduinos now and that, or just, you know, there's so many microcontroller designs or different products out there that you could go with. But clearly the Arduino library and the ecosystem that's built up now and the fact that there's many more powerful processors that really can run in that development environment. I think, I don't know, I tend to work in that area myself.
Yeah, very neat, very neat.
Thank you. So I guess I've kind of gone over a pretty good overview of everything. I did not, if anybody wants to see the foam process, I can give you a quick thing on that. Otherwise, I notice we're kind of hitting up on our time limit here, so. It's up to you. I can go a little longer if there's interested people.
Can you just give us like the information of what you use?
Yeah. Okay, let me get out of this so I can go to the other thing.
Chris, I'm going to leave, so thank you very much for your presentation.
You're welcome. I enjoyed providing you all with this today, so I think I'm going to go here, and then I'm going to go here. So the materials, this is what I use. I buy it from this company in Florida. They'll ship it out that day usually. And their prices are decent. So this is So I buy it in it's like, I don't know, they're gallons, but they sell it by pounds. So this is 4-pound density. It comes in different densities. I found 4 pounds is the best. They used to have 6. They don't sell 6. They go 2, 4, 8. 8 is too dense, so you got to use more of it because it doesn't spread as far, doesn't foam as much. 2 is too crumbly. 2 is like you fill up like a pontoon boat thing with, you'd use it for flotation, filling voids and things like that. So basically you mix it in equal parts, and usually it only takes about a cup this big. So like an ounce of the material, an ounce and a half of each part. Let me see if I got you. I use some screen wire. This shows, so I cut it, I put it on a very simple cardboard mesh. It does not have to be strong enough to hold it. And sorry, one of these will have it. Oh, here it is. So
he does his scenery.
This is how I create my hard shell scenery without using plastic cloth, which I despise. This creates a lightweight, very rigid structure that you can cut with like a simple saw or a knife. You can paint and scenic right on it. You can plant trees into it, or you can do rock. I do rock layups over it, carvings. I carve my rock on top of it, and you just put like a veneer of a plaster that you need to get the depth of the carving. But anyway, I use a little kind of like a plastic cup. I combine the 2 pieces per the quantity of the size of the material I want to lay up. It's like doing a fiberglass layup. You mix it vigorously for about 15 seconds with the little tongue depressor. You need to have a covered area, and the cup, this are going to be disposable. And I use rubber gloves and like a little plastic disposable smock thing. You want to cover yourself. Here's how it's done. You lay the fiberglass, the front of the fiberglass should be laid down on top of a 2 mil drop cloth on a flat surface, like a piece of thick plywood or a piece of glass or something. Mm-hmm. And then we mixed up that stuff and we spread it really fast, and then we squeegeed it across. Now it's foaming. I think I actually have, so that's what it looks like after it's foamed. I might actually have a video of it foaming, but I haven't really worked on this. Oh, here it is. So you let it foam for a couple of minutes, 2 to 3 minutes. It starts to get plasticky. It's not cured yet. It takes a good 5 to 10 minutes to fully cure, but at one point it's going to fire, and then it's going to start just getting harder. So before it hits that point where it's going to just get harder and harder, we want to lay it up on our cardboard mesh. Mm-hmm. So basically, from the time I started mixing to the time it started foaming is less than a minute. So mix for 15, spread for about 15, and then don't try to fix it up any prettier than you see right here. That's really not bad. Now it's sitting up there, and see how it's kind of still spongy? I can press down on that, but it's curing. And what I'm doing is I want to push it into any seams, like against the backdrop. Now I put a piece of plastic down the backdrop so that it would be easy to clean up any excess stuff that's spilled against the backdrop. And I have drop cloths in front because I have some finished scenery below this. So whatever you don't want it on, put some plastic around it. And then I think I'm going to peel it now. So now that piece of drop cloth is going to be peeled away because that was a nice substrate to carry it on. And the nice thing is once the stuff fires off and gets hard, you'll be able to just peel that plastic right back off it. Yeah, it's not quite, yeah, okay, it's not quite hot enough yet. It's still a little sticky. So we wait a minute. So I don't know if this is a video. One of these. So hopefully this is where we just peel it off. Here it comes. So now you peel that off. And you see the excess that didn't have any window screen in between it. It's going to just crumble. It's just like concrete. If there's no rebar, there's no strength.
Right.
Right? So it needs the, I call the window screen the rebar. It needs a little rebar. Doesn't need a lot. Now, I usually just do one layer, but if you wanted to make it stronger, tougher than it's ever been before, you could do more layers on top. So if I have a big, like that big mountain I did up there, I might have double layered some parts of it where I thought it needed more rigidity.
Mhm.
Rigid, whatever that word is. So, yeah. It's after 9. I start having more trouble talking. So now it's cured. And see, as you put the pieces together, they lock together and they form a very rigid shell. And see that's what's under it. And you could just leave the cardboard there, or you could go up under it and rip it out. Now, another trick I learned is leave the cardboard weave wide enough that you can leave a piece of drop cloth, a plastic cloth under there, and you can put your hand in there. And if you want to bump up a section, you bump it up or push down on it. And now you're shaping your landform. And you didn't spend much time on shaping it with the cardboard because you can work it as you do it. And as you do some of this, you can get pretty clever with it. Like you can set in like you want to have like a little stream or runoff and things like that. You can get pretty good at doing all that. But the key is to tape over and cover over anything you don't want it to have.
Right.
Yeah, so that's that. That's good. And if I pressed hard enough, I could crack that, especially on the edge. But remember, it's not, but if you're building like a modular layout and you want to have some really cool, like maybe one big thing, like a mountain scene in it or something, but you still want it to be portable, you could build this whole thing and it could be done in a way where it's detachable. Like, so it could be built and only attached to your backdrop thing that you screw to the back of your module.
Mm-hmm.
And now you can have a very transportable, very cool scenic effect. Now you could do the same thing by carving and layering in blue foam, but it'll actually be heavier and this goes way quicker. So I guess that's all those. Yeah, I don't know why that one's there. So let's see. So yeah, so this part actually before, when I first started doing, I thought I was going to make all these removable and I said, let me try blue foam. And then I just put a little plaster and I learned how to carve. I wanted to have just a little bit of rock work there. So that was one of my first things I did, but now I don't even bother with that anymore. I just build it this way. So now as I started finally doing this section, I just butt it up against that, but I wanted that piece to still be removable. Why, I'm not so sure. So I did this in a way where they actually touch, but they're not connected. And then I'm going to do a little plaster in that area. So that's my work area where I do the layups. That's that material. And if you go to this guy's website, uscomposites.com, I think, they'll sell it in small quantities or giant drums. You know, oh, the movie people use this to build sets or amusement park, you know, things.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a lot of that stuff you see is done with this kind of foam. They usually, if it's outdoors, they use the higher density, and if it's subject to a lot of wear and tear, they use the high, like the 16-pound or 30-pound density. It's like a rock when it sets, but it doesn't expand very much either. So that's sort of the trade-off, because the price is about the same, but the expansion, you know, if I went to 8 pounds, it would only expand maybe I could go half as much as I do with 4. Or it's more geometrically, actually. So I found 4 works the best, cost versus strength and all that kind of stuff. So I think we did all that.
When did you start developing this process, Chris?
You know, I actually, when I was starting on my layout down in North Carolina, in I think it was 2007-8 timeframe, starting to do the scenery, I searched online and I found this little PDF some guy had posted, and he had pictures of how he did this. And I've never seen it shown anywhere else ever since.
Well, Joel Bragdon Enterprises. This is a method that I was the Canadian distributor for all of Bragdon Enterprises products. And this is how he does scenery. Matter of fact, he did some very famous layouts. I won't give you the name because it's kind of a secret type of thing, and he got paid for it. But this is how he did the thing. Oh, instead of screen, what he initially started out with was actually very fine bubble wrap. And he would put the bubble wrap down and then put the foam over it and then set it up just like basically you've done it.
Yeah.
And but it is so you can go to his site if you want. He's got all the materials there to buy as well. It's Bragdon Enterprises.
Oh.
And I think he was doing it from about 1997, but it is a fantastic way, as you mentioned, for modules, for lightweight modules, and you don't have to worry about it. You know, if it gets banged, it kind of just comes back.
Yeah, I gotta say, I love doing it this way. I did my first layout and I had to build this whole big mountain scene, and I did it all in plaster, paper towels, dip thing to build the hard shell, and then I did plaster over it. And it took me months to clean the plaster dust out of everything. And this goes on quick. I was doing this, and I had this whole area was covered in drop cloths, and I was doing all this work last week. Then Saturday I said, I got to clean up because I got to shoot some video. I had it all cleaned up in 3 hours, and I was testing trains.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I know many methods work. I know people have their favorite, but everyone who comes here asks me about this.
Yeah, no, it's a great way to do it. But you're absolutely right. You have to, it's sort of like painting. You got to put down the drop sheets and everything else, because otherwise that foam will end up where you don't want it.
Yes. And I always tell people it's just like Gorilla Glue. Once you stick it, it's pretty much stuck. So when you put that laminate down, you can maybe fudge it a little bit, but you really can't pick it back up.
Right.
And you just got to accept what you get and then kind of work with it if it wasn't quite what you want it. But the nice thing is you can always scrape it off, cut it and all that, and it cuts easy, it scrapes off easy and things like that once it sets.
Yeah.
But well, it's still gooey. You don't really want to try to wipe it up.
What's the cost per, as you say, a gallon for the AB?
Well, what you saw there, those 2 gallons, I think I paid $90 for that.
Okay.
And that will go quite a distance. So I've used about 4 gallons so far in this layout, all told. And if you saw parts of the layout, all up top, it's all done that way.
Yeah.
And I probably will use that gallon up on the rest of this layout, but I don't think I'll need more than that, but maybe I will. Maybe I'll need to buy one more.
What was the name of the company that you mentioned, the guy that sells this?
It's called US Composites. And if you just Google that, they're based in somewhere down in Southern Florida.
Okay.
And they're really good about shipping it out right away. They have a real simple internet site. You fill out the form, and they'll get it to you. And they sell it as small as like quarts. So you can buy a little to try. And you can also buy this. Sometimes you can buy this at craft stores too. But the key thing is, what I found is 4-pound density works best for this type of hard shell technique.
Got it.
Again, it's the best compromise between strength and cost because it goes further. And 2 pound just isn't strong enough. You'll have to do multiple lamina, and it foams up too much. So
the other gentleman that was talking, I didn't get your name. I'm sorry. What was the company that you mentioned, the modeler that had used it or sells it?
Yes, it's Joel Bragdon, and it's Bragdon Enterprises, and he does molds. He does all kinds of stuff.
How do you spell it? Joel.
Joel, yeah, first name. Bragdon, okay. Bragdon, I believe. Bragdon.
Okay.
And he's in California. I'm just gonna Bragdon Model Trains, Bragdon Enterprises. Hold on. Yeah, Joel is a fantastic guy. He does a lot of stuff, and here I'll put it in the chat. His
Good.
So yeah, he's really a good guy, Jim, and I've known Joel a long time now. If you've ever used Bragdon rust powders.
I've heard of those. I've never used them though, but I didn't know that he was.
How old are you, young man?
Good
Come on,
God.
let's get with the program.
Don't even ask.
Let's get with the program.
Anyway.
You ever go to any train shows?
I used to, but I haven't been in years and years and years. Clark, have you got an email for him? Can you send me his email?
I'll look for it, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Joel puts on clinics at the national and the narrow gauge conventions.
Yeah.
Oh, I'll be darned. It figures because, I haven't been so long. I'm just kind of wandering around in what I remember the modeling used to be.
Well, you got to stop sewing. That's your problem.
Yeah, good. I know.
First narrow gauge convention I went to was 1990, and he was giving clinics then.
Yeah. Well, when I met Joel, when I saw the weathering powders, I said, "Have you got anybody in Canada selling this?" He says, "No." I said, "You do now," and I was bringing it into Canada by the big boxes, and I would sell it to the hobby shops, and I would do my own have my own booths at train shows, but I sold an awful lot of it.
I'll be darned.
And he's got the best rock molds, period. That guy.
They're pretty
All
good.
Right. Chris, I didn't mean to stop you what you were talking about. I just wanted to get his name, and we got kind of carried away here a little bit.
No, I'm pretty much talked out, I think. So unless anyone has anything specific, I think I pretty much have given you a decent overview of what I've been trying to accomplish.
Yeah, thank you very much for this information.
You're welcome.
Before everybody heads out, Jim, earlier on in the chat, I put about the resin cast we were talking about a couple of weeks ago.
Okay.
Well, on where to get it.
Oh yeah, the specialty resin stuff.
What's that?
The specialty resin.
Right. Yeah. They're in Dowagiac, Michigan, and it's a pretty good product. I've been using it for quite a few years.
What's the name of it?
Let's see if I can find it here in the chat.
I already got it pulled up. The name of the company is Specialty Resin and Chemical.
Right.
Okay.
And like I said in the chat, that I do the slow off-white, which works really well. It gives you some work time with it.
Well, listen, Chris, I want to thank you again. I just what you're doing and your model railroad is just amazing to me. I just when I first heard about it, I thought, no, that's not possible. Nobody is doing that kind of thing, and it's really it's great to see it. My article about you is just came out in the model print, O-Scale resource. So people can read a little bit more about you at least, but I want to thank you so much again for being here this night and for sharing your model railroad and the computerization stuff you've done. I really believe to an awful lot of people in the hobby. That is the future. I keep hearing about people talking about it more and more. I don't hear them talking about the program that you use. I hear them talking about the, and it's 4 initials, but I can't tell you what. That's it.
Yeah.
And every time I pass that, my eyes start glazing over because I'm just totally lost after that.
Yeah, I looked into that early on and I realized that that was more of a set of tools early on. I know they've done a lot more with it. And I use some of their components, like I used Dakota Pro and things like that. I use some of the monitoring products they produce. It's a great effort that that group's doing, but Train Controller is more of like buying an integrated solution that's already done a lot of the hard work for you, is the way I would describe the difference between the two approaches. It doesn't mean that the JMRI project with all the various subcomponents that are integrated into it won't someday rival or surpass what you can achieve with Train Controller or any other product. But Train Controller is now used around the world by approximately 15,000 individuals and organizations such as museums and things like that. So it's funny because a lot of people haven't heard of it, but yet in terms of the global distribution, it's used in a lot of places. And I know a lot of people who wanted to do these things 20 years ago. Many of them started on their own trying to do it or with things like JMRI. And there have been some other companies out there, but as far as I know, Train Controller is by far and away the single most extensive product that covers these features with the widest user base.
And most of the user base is outside the US. It really hasn't hit the US. So,
yeah, it actually, there's a decent amount in the US, but on the grand scheme of the things, no. And I mean, it's developed out of Germany and it does have a big, there's a lot of model railroaders in Germany and but people in Australia, all around the world. I mean, you go on the users forum for Train Controller and from all over the world. So, and that's a cool part about the hobby because it kind of, it transcends different geographic areas, cultural areas and interests and differences and things like that. But when it comes to model trains is trains. So,
one of the interesting things, Chris, you were just talking about the number of people using this. What I've seen and I see quite regularly is you're using it as the full package, just like you did for us at the museum. But you use it to control your signals. But recently, I found out there's quite a few people around that are using subsets of it. For example, John Newick in around here in New Hampshire uses it strictly for the dispatching, and the dispatcher board. He controls his train just like normal, but he uses it as a block indicator, so he can use it as a dispatcher. On Saturday, there was another presentation that someone else was using it just to control their turnouts and some of the signal aspects. So it's surprising how many people use it as little subsets.
Exactly.
Yeah. I've heard that there's a program, Chris, called Train Tracker. And I've heard that the combination of Train Tracker and the Freewall program that you're using, I've heard the combination of those two would enable you to do everything you're doing now, but also be able to handle a switching operation the same way that you're running your mainline trains right now.
Yeah, I've heard that name before, and I haven't seen much about it, how it's used, how it's integrated together, but I have heard of that. Yeah. And let's also understand that every day there's new ideas coming and people working on how to do more things. and I only know what I know because of what I've seen or heard. So I'm sure that just like the people at who work behind the scenes to make JRMI do all the things it does, and that's a volunteer effort by it's kind of an open source project. The people at Fenwald, the founder and the people he works with, I'm sure are working on what will be the next big step for train controller. And who knows who's working on something that we may not even know about right now today, and it may be the best thing 5 years from now.
I understand.
Yeah, you know, it's my belief that just like DCC, when it came in 1996, it was a revolutionary change to what the future of model railroading would entail. And it's really led to that in large part. It was a stepping stone that made possible the things that I do today using train controller over DCC enabled trains. So there's no reason not to believe that more sophistication and capability is still going to come. But 20 years from now, it may be quite normal that people use something like what we call train controller in this software that I use. It may be a very normal part of many model railroads, just like today DCC is, and 20 years ago, it was a new thing on the block. So
I think what you're doing is I think you're on the cutting edge of where model railroading is going. I really do. I hear too many people starting to talk about it. And like Rich just said, you know, they don't talk in terms of computerization of their model railroad, but they may be using bits and pieces of it for whatever purposes. And it amounts basically to the same thing. Yep. So I really think that you're on the cutting edge. You may be further out on that edge than a lot of people are right now, but that's why I wanted you to be here tonight. I think it's fascinating what you're doing, and I like you say, in 5-10 years, there's no telling where this is going to lead. But I think we can look back on it and say that you were one of the people that pushed it this far.
Well, yeah, and I believe in it. I think it's a great addition to, you know, it adds, I call it the sixth dimension to model railroading. And I think a lot of people who come and view the layout, many model railroaders who've come in maybe with a little bit of skepticism have, for the most part, walked away quite impressed and with the belief, maybe an encouragement even. I know with Rich, that's how Rich saw the layout, and then he got the museum members to come over, and together we demonstrated what is possible today with proper use of computer-aided operation software. And now we've been working together now for over 2 years, and the museum now is not only greater in scope in terms of its modeling display with all the improvements that the members have made there, but now it's a live functioning demonstration of how life occurred in it's September. What's the date, Rich, in September?
1909.
Yeah. So I tell you, and from my standpoint, it equates to what the Pendant Museum is in Great Britain. It's the only model railroad that I have found in the United States that really tries to capture the moment in time where model railroading in a specific part of the U.S. actually occurred. And being able to bring that to life, like Rich and his club is doing, I think is just phenomenal.
Yeah, no, it's been a real honor to participate and help with that effort.
Yeah, the visitors, I've seen the visitors before when we had the single trains running. And if we had multiple volunteers, we could run multiple trains. But if you were by yourself, which we are often, that single train was, you know, kids and families that visited, you know, they were impressed with the layout. But now when we give a tour with an eye on my iPad and knowing what the trains are going to do ahead of time, I can actually set up the scenario for them to know the express train is coming through, where it stops, where it doesn't stop, and how the freight trains are respecting it. and things like that. So they are now seeing how the railroad might have been, or how it operated in 1909. So that's really changed the layout tremendously.
Chris, thank you so very much for being here this evening. I want to thank you one more time. And I really do appreciate it so very much.
Okay. Good night, everyone.
Before everyone leaves, I want a couple of things here I want to say. Next time, guy by the name of Paul Reeves. Paul is a new O-scale model manufacturer. And he's really a neat guy. And I think you're going to enjoy his modeling and learning about his company. So he'll join us Saturday evening. I hope you'll come back for it. The other thing I want to mention, there's a modeling SIG, a SIG that's connected with the NMRA, and they model steel mills and steel modeling. And they're having a Zoom meeting. Dylan, if you can put that up for me.
I'm on it. Let me pull the
flyer. They're having a Zoom meeting November the 14th, 2020 at 11 Eastern Daylight Time. And the guy that is running their show for them is Philip Burnside. And Dylan can give you his email address on the chat function. So if you have any questions, but I've just found out about this organization, and Philip contacted me and asked me to try to help them get their word out about their Zoom meeting. So if you're interested in steel industries and the steel mill modeling and so forth, they're going to have a fairly sophisticated program put together on November the 14th at 11 o'clock Eastern Daylight.
I just put something in the chat and a PDF in the chat about the show you're mentioning.
Thank you, TC. I actually was trying to upload that flyer and it would not let me upload it.
No, I had to convert it to PDF.
Okay, well, thank you. But it is in the chat. I did just put Paul or Phil's email in there. Why am I calling him Paul?
Okay, and also TC is going to also put the steel Zoom meeting on our website. So you'll be able to see it there too when you go to our website.